this anti-authority sentiment resulting from COVID-19 and the pandemic era lockdowns was a big part of what shifted younger members, that Gen Z 2.0, younger members of Gen Z, to the right.
You are watching The Big Deal, where we are continuing our series on the evolving landscape of American voters. In recent episodes, we've examined trends among Latino and Asian voters. Today, we're talking about the youth vote, which President Trump lost by 4 percentage points last year. That was actually a sharp improvement compared to 2020, but 4 months into his second term, a batch of new polls finds that the president is at risk of losing his gains among voters under 30 years old. Young Americans affected by Trump administration policies say that they have grown increasingly unhappy with the president's job performance, and that includes college students who rely on federal funding. Spectrum News reporter Jennifer Roberts has a report from North Carolina about the impact of Trump's cuts to education.
What do you need?
Kalatza Ramirez and Jordan McAfee both study social work. They're also first-generation students at Johnson C. Smith University.
You're going to go to the next TRIO trip?
TRIO is a federal program serving first-generation and low-income students on campuses nationwide. It offers services like tutoring, mentoring, and financial guidance.
The journey has been very hard, and it is through them that I made it this far.
Without TRIO, these students tell me their academic journeys might have turned out different.
Honestly, I may have dropped out.
TRIO's future is a bit in limbo because it's funded through the Department of Education. Weeks back, President Donald Trump signed an executive order aimed at dismantling the Department of Education. But on Thursday, a federal judge blocked the order. The White House says they're challenging the ruling. But the president is also proposing budget cuts. It would eliminate funding for TRIO programs altogether.
At this time, I think that we are all in a space of uncertainty.
Kenyatta Reed is director of TRIO Student Support Services at JCSU. She says TRIO is serving at least 185 students on campus.
We just provide an extra layer of financial literacy, of academic skill development.
Reed is a TRIO alum herself. She wants lawmakers to understand how critical the services are for first-gen students.
Consider the futures of our students.
Jennifer Roberts, Spectrum News 1.
Joining me now with some analysis of the youth vote is Rachel Janfaza, the founder of Up and Up Strategy, a research and consulting firm focused on reaching Gen Z. And Rachel, we often refer to voters under 30 as a single group, but you've actually been studying and writing about a divide among Gen Z voters, making a distinction between those who had pretty much come of age and were adults when the pandemic hit in 2020 and those who were still in high school. You're calling that younger group Gen Z 2.0. And you wrote something I wanted to follow up on. You wrote that this second group felt the emotional toll as government mismanagement kept them in lockdown and away from their friends. Frustration with rules that seemed ineffective or hypocritical fueled a rebellious posture that has lingered, leaving Gen Z 2.0 skeptical toward people in charge who pretend to know what they're doing. Is that disillusionment you're writing about? Is that what gave President Trump so much support from younger voters this time?
Well, first of all, Errol, thank you so much for having me. I do think, as you pointed out, that this anti-authority sentiment resulting from COVID-19 and the pandemic era lockdowns was a big part of what shifted younger members, that Gen Z 2.0, younger members of Gen Z, to the right in 2024. I also think that's been paired with a frustration with political correctness that was bubbling up during the pandemic and has lingered on afterwards, that I'm hearing is coming from both members of Gen Z 1.0 and Gen Z 2.0. So overwhelmingly, their young people are frustrated with political correctness and did see Trump in 2024 as the opposite of that in many ways. And the third thing is that the economy really is the top issue for young people. And there were many young people who felt that for whatever reason, President Trump would have a better handling of that than former President Biden would have had, and that was part of their movement to the right as well.
Okay, so now the latest Harvard Youth poll surveyed 18 to 29-year-olds, and it finds some disillusionment. More than half of them currently believe the United States is heading in the wrong direction under President Trump. And the polling shows young voters are not happy about his immigration policies or issues like abolishing the Department of Education, as we saw. But those are things that Trump clearly signaled he was going to do. Were voters not paying attention?
I mean, I think that it's not necessarily that they weren't paying attention, but it's kind of a prioritization of issues. And overwhelmingly, one of the things that I hear in my listening sessions with young people is that this generation feels worse off than their parents were when they were their age. And President Trump uses this nostalgic rhetoric that harkens back to times that they wish they had. And that was part of their decision making process as well.
How should the political parties approach this voting bloc ahead of the upcoming midterms?
The most important thing to understand is that young voters aren't so different from older voters after all. And my biggest advice to both parties would be to approach them like they would any other voting bloc, listen to and legitimize their concerns without brushing them off before offering a path forward.
So now, I mean, when commercial marketers are trying to think of who they want to appeal to, they're always going to this same kind of demographic because they're going to be consumers for the next 30 or 40 years. Political parties don't necessarily operate that way, right? I mean, should we expect younger candidates to be the leaders who sort of indicate the direction where these voters are going to go?
It's an interesting question. I think when I ask young people this, it comes down to both personality and policy, and age isn't necessarily the determining factor. But when you look at Gen Z as a voting bloc, this generation has demonstrated high youth voter turnout in a way that prior generations hadn't. In 2024, there was 47% youth voter turnout, according to Circle at Tufts, and that's nearly as high as it was in 2020, which was a historic high of 50%. And so while this generation is deeply, deeply frustrated, they're not tuning out of politics altogether. They're actually turning out in high numbers. And so I think that that is a sign to both parties that they really should be paying attention to this voting bloc because their loyalties are not solidified yet. And they're a very persuadable group that does care and feels that their life is deeply affected by the issues that politicians are legislating.
Okay. Thank you so much for all of that insight. Great to talk with you, Rachel Janfaza. Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, and click the subscribe button right here. You can also download our app or watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.